You brought 30 warlords and an orbital dreadnought to fight one man? I cracked my neck and smiled, letting the desert wind carry the silence that followed. Bad math. Behind me, the wreckage shifted, slow, deliberate. Something massive was waking up. It wasn't the kind of scene that lent itself to optimism. I was standing knee-deep in dust, the ground scorched from 1,000 past battles. Scattered ship hulls and broken weapons lay like fossilized bones across the plain. The Torquary expanse had been dead for a decade, ever since the Galactic Accord signed off on wiping it off the star map. But apparently it was still useful for one thing: public executions. Mine, to be exact. I counted 31 warlords. 30 were standing in a half-circle around me, some armored in old-world exosuits, some draped in the skins of creatures that didn't even exist in the databanks anymore. The 31st was above us in low orbit, commanding a dreadnought the size of a small city. That one hadn't even bothered to come down. He preferred to broadcast his sneers from a hollow drone shaped like a silver skull with teeth. "You are hereby charged with crimes against the Warlord Compact," boomed the skull. "Sabotage, espionage, infiltration, the destruction of classified assets, theft of command data, murder, and worst of all, mockery." One of the warlords, a flabby thing covered in repurposed gold chains, stepped forward and snarled. "Yeah, you called my dog a fruit basket. It was wearing sunglasses and a tutu," I said. "He has anxiety." The other warlords chuckled, but not in a friendly way. Their laughter was sharp, mocking. I didn't blame them. I was unarmed, outnumbered, and apparently unprotected. But appearances, like the egos surrounding me, were fragile things. I spread my arms. "So, you're all here. I'm here. Let's skip the boring part and get to the mistake you're all about to make." A tall warlord with tusks and a laser lance strode forward. "We don't execute you because we have to. We do it because we want to. You embarrassed us. You made fools of the Compact. And now you're going to die very, very slowly." "Good," I said. "Just make it quick." The tusked warlord blinked. "What?" "Exactly." I looked behind me. The crater hadn't been there this morning. It had formed an hour ago when I walked to the center of the dust plain and planted my feet. I hadn't moved since. The wreckage at the crater's base had started smoldering. Now it hummed. The warlords shifted uneasily. A few raised weapons. The hollow skull buzzed, then flickered, clearly detecting new energy signatures. "What is that?" it asked coldly. "That," I said, "is your math problem." A metallic hand, charred, but functional, gripped the crater's edge and pulled. The ground cracked. Dust leapt skyward. What rose wasn't a tank. It wasn't a drone. It wasn't even fully machine. It was Stander. He was dented, blackened, and missing one optical unit. But he stood like a mountain that refused to fall. 10 feet of fury and exoskeletal rage, painted in the darkened blue of a war long forgotten. Gasps swept through the warlords like wind through dry grass. One of them choked out. "That's impossible. That unit was retired." Another took a step back. "That's a legacy core. That's pre-accord tech." Stander's voice boomed across the battlefield, slow and gravelly like a ship's death rattle. "I was retired. Then you woke me up. And now I'm standing." I smiled. "Told you." Bad math. The first wave opened fire immediately. Stander didn't flinch. He raised his right arm. What remained of his kinetic shield generator sparked violently, and absorbed the blasts like raindrops. When the dust cleared, he was still there. And now, he was moving. He charged the closest group, metal feet pounding into the ground. I sprinted in the opposite direction, straight toward a pair of startled guards trying to recalibrate their plasma cannons. One of them shouted, "Where's your weapon?" as I dove into him. I rolled off his back, swiped a pulse grenade from his belt, and tossed it at the other one's feet. "Right here," I said, as they disappeared in a flash of white light. Stander had reached the heavy troopers. With one sweep of his massive arm, He swatted a mech like a toy across the sky. Another trooper launched a magnetic hook, trying to tether Stander's leg. Bad move. Stander grabbed the line, yanked, and sent the soldier flying over his shoulder like a kite in a hurricane. Behind me, the dreadnought's orbital cannon began to glow. I could feel the heat just from its charging sequence. I tapped the chip embedded in my collarbone and whispered, "Now would be a good time." A signal burst outward from the crater, disrupting targeting systems across the battlefield. The dreadnought's cannon fizzled, sparked, and then, gloriously, exploded inward. The ship's top deck vented plasma into the vacuum and spiraled into a slow retreat. The floating skull buzzed again, panicked. "Abort! Abort engagement! We've been baited!" "No," I said, as I tackled another warlord trying to retreat into a transport ship. "You've been introduced." He tried to stab me. I caught his wrist and slammed his head into the ramp. "My name's Rez." "The guy behind me?" "That's Stander. We've got a list. And you're all on it." Stander tossed another warlord aside like trash and stomped toward me. His armor hissed with steam and microfractures, but his core glowed strong. "Status?" he asked. "Blood pressure's great," I said. "How about you?" "I killed 17, he replied. "That counts as stretching." We both turned as the surviving warlords began to regroup. Bigger weapons. Heavier armor. More desperation. I took a deep breath and looked at Stander. "Round 2? He nodded. "Until they learn to count." So we charged. Not because we expected to win, but because we already had. They just didn't know it yet. The battlefield reeked of ozone and melted metal, the kind of stench that lingered in your throat longer than the smoke in your eyes. Stander stood motionless beside me, like some vengeful statue forged from the rage of dead wars. His left arm sparked where the armor had sheared clean off, exposing a mess of cables and synthetic muscle. He didn't seem to notice or care. 30 warlords hadn't been enough, apparently. Now their private armies were rolling out from the cliffs above, drop crawlers and repulsor tanks hissing as they fanned out across the dust plain, boxing us in with disciplined speed. A voice crackled from a megaphone in one of the troop carriers, shrill and smug. "You've made your point, human. Now make your grave." Stander tilted his head slightly. "They think they're clever. I miss when people just screamed and ran." I kicked a chunk of smoldering debris out of the way and ducked behind a broken hull, wiping soot from my hands. "Yeah, back when enemies were polite. These ones want a show." From the edge of the crater, a new wave of soldiers descended, these ones elite by their gear and formation. Their helmets had glowing slits, their rifles were precision laser accelerators. No bark. I'll bite. I tapped my collar again. "Res to bunker cache. Deployed distraction protocol Echo 4. Time delay, 20 seconds. Perimeter radius, 15 meters. There was a brief silence, then a cold robotic chirp confirmed receipt. Somewhere beneath the dust, something began to stir. The enemy didn't notice. They were too focused on Stander, which, admittedly, was understandable. Even injured, he looked like a nightmare someone built in a black site. The first tank fired. A shockwave of energy burst out, slamming into Stander's chest and pushing him back 3 feet, but he didn't fall. Instead, he knelt. The ground cracked under him. "Armor integrity at 49%, he said. "Permission to return fire?" I raised an eyebrow. "You need permission now?" He didn't answer, just stood with a low mechanical grunt and extended his right hand. From a compartment in his back, a long, black cylindrical object rotated and locked into place. The launcher. It wasn't fancy. Just devastating. He fired once. The tank didn't explode as much as it evaporated, instant plasma ignition through the ammo core. The warlords' front line scattered like ants under a magnifying glass, their formations breaking under sheer disbelief. I jumped from cover just as the distraction mine finished its countdown and launched into the air with a pop. For a moment, nothing. Then a blinding surge of holographic decoys erupted across the battlefield, 20 duplicates of me and Stander sprinting in all directions. Some firing. Some taunting. One doing cartwheels. The soldiers hesitated. Bad move. I was already inside their flank by then, slashing with a reclaimed blade from a downed war bot and ducking under suppressive fire. I wasn't the strongest, not even close, but I was fast, and worse, unpredictable. One of the guards reached for his comms. I slapped his helmet sideways, grabbed his rifle, and buried the butt into the side of his knee. He dropped with a scream and a crunch. Stander was moving like a titan now, tearing through vehicles and obstacles with the sheer momentum of hatred. At one point, he picked up a disabled walker, used it to swat a line of troopers, and then threw it into the base of a Warlord's mobile command tower. The explosion was enough to knock 3 other structures offline. One of the Warlords, a thin insectoid with a metal crest and far too many eyes, started shouting for air support. "Deploy the Sky Razors!" she screeched. "Now! Now! I want the air black with blades!" They came, of course. Swarms of them, small, agile attack drones shaped like shurikens with wings, buzzing with lethal intent. They spun into formation above us, casting shifting shadows across the dust plain. I pulled my goggles down. "This is about to get spicy." Stander looked up. "Spicy is acceptable." The drones dove in tight spirals, weaving around each other, targeting systems locking on to anything warm and moving. The first few hit the holograms and exploded in confused flashes. The rest recalibrated fast. I sprinted for the crater edge and threw a pulse beacon as hard as I could toward the main transport ship. The beacon blinked once, then detonated midair, emitting an electromagnetic burst that sent the first wave of Sky Razors careening off course, slicing into their own ranks. But we were still exposed. "We need cover!" I shouted. "There is no cover," Stander replied. "There's only forward." He surged ahead, arms up, letting the drones swarm him like metal bees. His outer armor was shredded, pieces falling off like flakes. But for every 5 drones that hit, he took out 10. He spun, grabbed 2 out of the air, and slammed them into the ground like cymbals. "This is unsustainable," he said calmly, even as one embedded itself into his side and sparked violently. I ducked into a crater and shouted into the comm. "Emergency override! Protocol Bastion! Release the payload!" From beneath us, the earth groaned. And then, from the ruins of a long-forgotten supply depot buried deep under the dust plain, a defensive auto-turret array deployed, 6 towers, ancient but powerful, with enough firepower to make the Warlords second-guess their career choices. They unfolded like spider legs, scanning, locking, and firing in all directions. The Sky Razors didn't stand a chance. The air lit up with 100 tiny implosions, and within a minute the sky was clear. Stander collapsed to one knee, smoke trailing from his chest. "Systems at 23%. Reboot required soon." I ran to him and slapped a patch onto his side, an emergency thermal sealant good for 30 seconds of stability. "You reboot now, you leave me solo. You think I'm funnier when you're offline?" He managed what might have been a chuckle, then scanned the battlefield. "More enemies approaching. 12 seconds out. Heavily armored." I glanced toward the cliffs. A new wave of troops, taller, heavier, armed with rail throwers and shock spears, were marching in precise formation. I grimaced. "We're really making them spend, huh?" Stander tried to stand but buckled. I caught him with my shoulder. "No more heroics, big guy. We've got to go tactical now." He pointed toward a broken ship core nearby. "Energy signature, enough for a chain reaction. You detonate that, we clear this area." I followed his gaze and nodded. "You're gonna be able to run?" "I will crawl with velocity." "That's the spirit." I sprinted toward the core, weaving through bodies and wreckage. A rail shot grazed my leg, but I didn't stop. I jammed the explosive beacon into the core, punched the timer, and dove behind the wreckage. A second later, a shockwave ripped through the plane, flipping transport ships and burying enemy squads in a wave of dirt and fire. The elite wave didn't even make it halfway. When I looked back, Stander was up again. Limping. Smoking. Glowing. But standing. We regrouped near the crater, winded but upright. I leaned against a piece of half-melted plating. That your version of cardio? Stander scanned the area, eyes flickering. New pattern forming. Enemy tactics shifting. They're afraid. I nodded, breath ragged. They should be. We haven't even started yet. The dust hadn't even begun to settle before the next move came, and this time it wasn't flashy. It was tactical. Precise. The kind of play that meant someone smart had finally taken command. No more brute force or ego-driven charges. Now it was stealth, deception, and misdirection. Stander noticed it first. Scanners detecting phased signal loops. Cloaked units inbound. I scanned the terrain. Nothing obvious. Just the broken skyline of war debris and the twitching remnants of the last squad we'd torn through. But Stander wasn't wrong. The air had shifted. It was too quiet. Too coordinated. Then it hit, literally. A pulse charge slammed into Stander's side and exploded on contact, launching him back against a shattered support pillar. I barely dodged the next one, rolled behind a fallen beam, and pulled my sidearm. Cloaked soldiers flickered into view just long enough to fire again, then disappeared like mirages. I fired blind. Missed. One round clipped the ground where my head had been 2 seconds earlier. Multiple phased optics, Stander said over the comm, voice glitching. They're using subharmonic dampeners. I gritted my teeth and whispered back. Guess someone's finally playing chess. I crawled along the broken hull of an old dropship, waiting for movement. One flicker near my left, then another to the right. They were circling, closing in. This wasn't a brawl anymore, this was a hunt. And I was the prize. Another bolt struck inches from my foot, vaporizing the metal. I dove forward, slid down the wreckage, and landed hard in the dust. That's when I saw it, one of the attackers uncloaking mid-movement. Tall, thin, with dual plasma blades. Not just a soldier. An assassin. A specialized unit from the Obsidian Order. I rolled as the blade came down, sparks slicing from my jacket. Came up swinging and landed a glancing punch that did nothing but earn me a kick to the chest. I flew back into a wall of bent scaffolding. My vision blurred. Before I could recover, a second figure appeared behind the first, this one holding a rifle the size of my leg. Stander! I yelled, but static answered. I was on my own. Again. The assassin stepped forward, slow and deliberate, weapon raised. Name? He hissed through his mask. I muttered. And yours? Irrelevant, he replied. You won't be alive long enough to remember. He fired. I rolled, grabbed a shard of metal, and threw it without aiming. It hit his arm, just enough to shift his aim. The blast scorched the dirt inches from my head. I ran for cover again, zigzagging through the wreckage. No sign of Stander. No time to think. I pulled out a flash round, ducked behind an old engine core, and waited for footsteps. When they came, I popped up and threw the charge. Blinding light washed over the plain. Screams. I lunged forward, disarmed the assassin, and drove my fist into his throat with everything I had. He fell, gagging, just as a second cloaked soldier decloaked and tackled me. We rolled through the dust, her blade grazing my ribs. I caught her wrist, twisted, and slammed her into the ground. She came up swinging, but I kneed her in the chest and jabbed the handle of my pistol into her temple. She dropped. I stood over her, panting. Irrelevant enough for you? Then I heard the sound, low, grinding, like a malfunctioning elevator in a horror movie. I turned to see Stander limping through a curtain of smoke, holding what remained of one of the cloaked units in his hand. You called? He rasped. Took your time, I replied. Had to reboot. I don't multitask well while on fire. Fair. He scanned the area. They're retreating. Temporary tactic. Delay maneuver. Delay what? Incoming. And then we both saw it, crawling over the far ridge like a metallic centipede. A mobile fortress, 50 meters tall and bristling with gun turrets, shield projectors, and hangar bays. It rolled on track legs, shaking the ground like a god's heartbeat. The Warlords had deployed the juggernaut. Stander narrowed his gaze. Tactical evaluation, unfavorable. I stared up at the towering monster as it rolled closer. You think? A voice echoed from its loudspeakers. You've made a mess, Terran. It ends now. The accent was thick. Mocking. It belonged to Warlord Drelk, the one warlord who had once held an entire asteroid colony hostage using just a gravitational inhibitor and a flamethrower. Stander turned his head slightly. New plan? I nodded. Same as the old plan. Improvise, confuse, explode. He pointed toward the ridgeline. There. Old fusion drill core. I saw it. Half buried. Still faintly humming. Think it's still got a charge? Only one way to find out. We reroute the juggernaut, funnel it over that spot, and boom. Yes. What if the core's dead? Stander looked at me. Then we die with flare. I grabbed a grapple cord and ran for the edge. Stander took a different route, luring the juggernaut's turrets with erratic movement, drawing fire. It worked for now. He absorbed 3 volleys before diving behind a broken cruiser engine. I reached the drill, ripped open its rusted casing, and jammed a power cell into the control panel. It flickered. Then lit up. We're in business! I yelled. Timer? Stander called back. 10 seconds! Make it count! He stepped into the juggernaut's path and stood still. I watched in disbelief as the mobile fortress turned, adjusting course straight for him. He didn't move. Not until the last second, when he leapt aside with surprising speed and shouted, Detonate! I hit the switch. The core pulsed, then split open with a blast that could have taken down a mountain. The juggernaut's midsection folded inward, legs snapping like straws. Fire burst from its underbelly. It tilted, screamed, and then collapsed into itself in a rolling wave of metal shrieks. The shockwave knocked me flat. When I came to, Stander was pulling me up. His chest plate was scorched black. One of his arms hung useless. But he was still there. How many lives do we have left? I muttered. 1. If we share. I laughed and coughed dust. Then let's not waste it. Around us, silence. Smoke. Fire. No reinforcements in sight. But we knew better. This wasn't the end. This was just the part where the stakes got personal. Where the warlords stopped playing and started hunting. And we had just become their obsession. The warlords hadn't just lost face. They'd lost money, blood, and the illusion of control. And nothing in the galaxy made monsters angrier than public humiliation. Stander and I had crippled a juggernaut-class fortress and sent an entire wave of elite soldiers back home in body bags. Or at least whatever was left of them. But this wasn't over. It wasn't even close. When the smoke cleared, and we caught our breath in the wreckage, I knew what would come next. Not waves. Not machines. But precision. Quiet. Subtle. The kind of move that didn't announce itself with thunder, but instead crept up in the night and slit your throat with a whisper. Stander's systems were shot. His right arm hung by a thread of reinforced tendon wire. His HUD flickered constantly, and his energy core was starting to degrade from sustained overload. I patched what I could, slapping on sealant foam and hard locks, while he leaned against a broken column that was still sizzling from the last blast. Next time, I muttered while tightening a coolant valve, we pick a fight with someone who's allergic to walking tanks and cloaking tech. He gave a low buzz that I decided to interpret as laughter. Next time, he said through a crackling vocoder, I pick the mission. We needed shelter, intel, and a way off this dust ball. A signal pulse I'd intercepted earlier revealed something interesting, an underground structure hidden beneath the battlefield. Too old to be part of the Warlord Compact's infrastructure. It was buried, sealed by time or sabotage, but the signal had flared the moment we blew the juggernaut. That meant something down there had woken up too. And whatever it was, it might be the only chance we had left. We reached the entrance by mid-cycle, dragging ourselves past scorched vehicles and melted armor. The hatch was massive, circular, and lined with blackened alloy. Not modern. Pre-Accord tech like Stander. There was no keypad, no console. Just an old etched panel with a long-forgotten Terran emblem, half erased by rust and impact scars. Stander leaned forward, scanned the surface, and said, "Biometric lock. But keyed to legacy DNA." I frowned. "Legacy? That's human?" "Not just human," he said. "Yours." I stared at him. "You're joking. I lack humor modules." "Great. That explains your taste in combat tactics." I stepped forward and placed my hand against the panel. For a second, nothing happened. Then the alloy warmed under my palm, and the etched lines lit up with faint golden light. The hatch split open with a sigh, as if the entire structure was exhaling after decades of silence. The stairwell inside descended in a spiral, lit by flickering old-world lamps that buzzed softly as we moved. Stander followed behind me, each step groaning under his weight. The deeper we went, the colder the air became. Not dead, but dormant. Like something had gone to sleep a very long time ago, and wasn't sure if it wanted to wake up. At the bottom, we found it, an old Terran intelligence chamber, still intact. Monitors lined the walls, systems booting up as we entered. One by one, they flickered to life, displaying command prompts and encrypted data logs. But in the center of the room stood a single stasis pod. It was empty. "Someone's been here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Stander scanned the room. "No life signs. But the logs are recent. 4 hours old." The monitors blinked, and suddenly the holographic image of a man appeared. Middle-aged, military-cut hair, sharp eyes. I knew that face. I'd seen it on mission reports, recruitment videos, and classified documents back when I still wore a uniform. General Soren, my former commanding officer. Long thought dead. His voice echoed through the chamber. "If you're seeing this, Rez, then you made it. And that means they're finally scared." I stood frozen as his recording continued. "The Warlord Compact wasn't an accident. It wasn't just a power grab. It was a containment effort. Something bigger's coming. They knew it. They planned for it. And you were never meant to survive long enough to find this place." His image flickered. "But if you did, then I'm giving you access to everything. All the mission logs, all the data we stole, everything the Compact tried to burn. Download it. And if Stander's still with you, well, he knows what to do." I turned to Stander, who said nothing. Just extended a data cable from his shoulder and plugged it into the terminal. The download began immediately. Files scrolled faster than I could read. Names. Coordinates. Technology specs. Secret alliances. Betrayals. Black sites. Experimental units. Whole factions that weren't supposed to exist. And then it stopped. A final file. One word in the title, Reaper. "What's Reaper?" I asked. Stander hesitated, then said, "Initiate visual log." The screen changed again. Footage. Blurry. Grainy. A battlefield. An entire Warlord fleet burning. Not just damaged, wiped. Annihilated by something moving too fast for sensors to track. A silhouette, vaguely humanoid, but massive, stood in the flames. Then the file ended. "That," Stander said, "is what they're trying to stop. Reaper isn't theirs. And it isn't ours. But it's coming." Before I could respond, the lights in the chamber died. Every system shut down in a heartbeat. The silence was absolute. Then a distant scraping echoed down the stairwell. Stander raised his head. "They found us." I drew my blade and pistol, heart thudding. "We hold them here?" Stander nodded. "No more running." The first shadow dropped into the chamber before I even saw the rope. A sleek unit, fully black, no insignia, moving with terrifying grace. I fired twice, hit it once, and watched it barely flinch. Stander tackled it into the wall. Another followed, then two more. The room erupted in chaos. I fought like a man possessed. I had to. This wasn't just another mission anymore. It was the truth. The reason I'd been hunted. The reason they'd sent 30 warlords after me. I was carrying a secret they couldn't afford to let live. Stander was losing pieces by the second. A blade took off what was left of his left arm. He stomped one attacker into the floor, but the cost was high. Sparks flew from his joints. "Res," he called, voice warping. "Final option." "Not yet!" I shouted. "I'm not leaving you." This was always the plan. He activated something on his chest. A countdown appeared in red across his visor. "Self-destruct initialized." I ran to him, tried to stop it, but he locked me out. "Too many. They'll just keep coming." "There's another way!" I yelled. "There always is!" He looked down at me, and for a second, there was nothing mechanical in his eyes. Just something like peace. "Tell them who we were." Then he pushed me toward the emergency exit hatch. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was him standing tall, surrounded, sparking and broken, but unbowed. Then came the blast. A thunderclap that shook the corridors. The stairwell collapsed behind me, fire chasing my heels as I sprinted into the dark. And still, even through the ringing in my ears and the smoke in my lungs, I could hear his voice, clear as code in my veins. "I stand, so you can run." 3 weeks later, I stood on the edge of a forgotten cliff, staring at the wasteland below. The skies stretched in quiet streaks of orange and violet, as if the planet itself had sighed and given up on drama for a while. I hadn't spoken much since the explosion. There weren't many people left to talk to anyway. I carried Stander's memory core in a reinforced pouch on my chest, scorched, dented, but intact. It was all I'd found after digging through the ruins of the underground chamber, fingers bleeding, lungs burning, ignoring the collapsing corridors and still radiating walls. I carried him out, or at least what was left of him. Because I'd promised. And because standing was his job. Running was mine. After the detonation, the Warlord compact fell into disarray. A strike like that, buried in the heart of their elite unit, wasn't just a wound, it was a message. Someone had gotten through. Someone had cracked the code, stolen the data, broadcast the truth. And then vanished. They didn't know where I'd gone. They just knew I was still out there. And that made them afraid. That made them desperate. When monsters don't know who's coming next, they start turning on each other. And that was the plan all along. The intelligence from the chamber was secure, copied, encrypted, scattered across 7 dead satellites and ghost orbits. But the most dangerous piece wasn't the data. It was the image. Reaper. That blurred figure walking through fire, untraceable and silent, dismantling fleets without making a sound. It wasn't a myth anymore. The compact believed it. They saw it. And now, they feared it. Not because they knew what it was, but because they didn't. I'd returned to the outpost on Tryon's Boneyard, a place no sane person would willingly go unless they were running from something worse. Out there, the sandstorms eat ships, and the soil hums with radiation. But deep inside the central spire, buried in layers of rusted security and retired war tech, sat a lab that belonged to someone who owed me a favor. Her name was Kresh. Biomechanist. Genius. Slightly deranged. The last person you'd trust with a coffee machine, but the first you'd call when you needed to rebuild the soul of a fallen war machine. When I walked into her lab, dragging a fire-blackened satchel with the core inside, she raised one eyebrow and said, "That better not be a bomb. Last guy brought me a bomb, and my left ear still sings jazz solos at night." I unzipped the satchel and showed her the core. Her smile dropped instantly. She reached out with gloved hands, reverent, like she was touching a relic. "Is that him?" I nodded. "Stander. I need him back." She looked at the damage. "He's seen better centuries. Half this casing's fused. You want the body or the brain?" I shook my head. Both. But start with the brain. She worked in silence for hours, mumbling in half-sentences and twitching every time a screen beeped. I paced. Waited. Eventually, she turned to me with a look I didn't like. There's a fail-safe in here, she said. Deep code. Hidden even from him. Someone built it to erase everything if the wrong systems accessed it. I clenched my fists. Can you override it? If I screw up, she said, you lose him for good. If I wait, I might lose the signal degradation window. You want a guarantee? Go find a preacher. I thought about it for a long minute, then nodded. Do it. She didn't speak again. Just pulled on a headset and went to work. I sat in the far corner, watching sparks fly from the console, eyes stinging. I hadn't even realized I was crying until I felt the warmth streaking down my cheek. It wasn't grief, exactly. Stander had always told me he wasn't alive, not really. He was just a sum of code and hardware, built to follow orders. But that wasn't true. Not to me. He stood when others ran. He shielded instead of striking first. He made jokes that weren't funny but somehow still landed. And he chose to burn so I could keep going. That wasn't code. That was character. The screen went black. I stood, hard in my throat. Kresh didn't move. Then the speakers crackled. Just once. A long silence followed. And then, in a voice that sounded like gravel in an old engine, I heard, "You look tired." I laughed. Loud. Harsh. And then I wiped my eyes. Yeah, well. You missed a lot. The lab lights flickered, and the main monitor glowed with red. 2 artificial eyes blinked into focus. Then came the words I'd been waiting to hear. Status standing. We spent the next 3 days rebuilding his frame. Kresh had access to prototype materials, smart alloy exoplating, reinforced joint structures, new optic cores. Stander was taller now. Leaner. Stronger. But the eyes were the same. Always watching. Always thinking. I loaded the mission logs into his system again, and he processed it all in under a minute. We have work to do, he said simply. The compact won't stop. Good, I said. Neither will we. Before we left, Kresh gave me a nod and slid a small device into my hand. Failsafe. If he ever gets compromised. I stared at it. You're kidding. One press, she said, and his entire memory bank wipes. Clean slate. No comeback. No reboot. I pocketed it without a word. I wasn't going to use it. But I knew I might have to. And that was enough. Our ship was old, ugly, and stitched together from stolen parts, but it flew. We left Tryon behind, heading toward the edge of the Orion scatter, where the next signal flare had been intercepted. Another black site. Another clue. Another chance to shake the compact until its bones rattled. We weren't soldiers anymore. We weren't even fugitives. We were something else entirely. Symbols. Warnings. My name had spread across the bounty boards like wildfire. They called me the last Terran ghost. And Stander? They called him the dead sentinel. The one that wouldn't stay down. We landed at the next site under cover of stormlight, moving silent and fast through the ruined corridors. No guards. No alarms. Just one sealed room and a console flashing a single prompt. A new file unmarked. I opened it. A hologram flickered on. A woman's voice spoke, calm and cold. To the one chasing shadows, you think you're ahead. But the Reaper is already here. Stander stood beside me. His fists clenched. She's lying, I said. He didn't look at me when he answered. She's not. Outside, the sky split open with the hum of distant engines. Black shapes moved across the stars, dozens, maybe more. No markings. No lights. Just silent ghosts. We weren't outnumbered anymore. We were hunted. And this time, we wouldn't be running. We'd be the one standing. Until the last.